It can be internally taken, but then it can also be, dual in the fact that the person is like yelling or arguing or throwing things or being enraged. But yet that anger is not just about that other person. It's really also about themselves. And sometimes the anger could be more about the person themselves and it's coming out. And that can be hard to understand too, because you're not really understanding that this person is super angry with themselves. They are super upset. They're angry about what's happening in their life. They're angry about what they're doing. And so this can come back and ricochet. But remember, there's also the collateral damage. So if this is happening and they're very upset about this, you could get hurt, yelled at, screamed at because you're in the proximity of the situation that can create the problem. And so understanding that intense anger and understanding that situation is very, very important to being able to limit and lower that explosive anger itself. The last one that I want to talk about in today's show is feeling suspicious or out of touch with reality. So there can be that suspicion, there can be that paranoid thoughts and behavior. So we can feel that everybody's out to get us. We can feel that everybody is out to hurt us to some degree. And this paranoia can feel very real in the moment. And, it's interesting because, then that in and of itself is one thing. I mean, we can feel suspicious or we can feel paranoid about a situation, but, coupled with multiple symptoms is what we're talking about. But, I want to go in more in depth with each one of these symptoms, but we don't have enough time, but we will here on upcoming shows. There's also some other situations and disorders that can also co-occur as well. There might be depression issues, substance abuse, eating disorders, as well as anxiety disorders. And I talked a little bit about that as well, because I feel like in the self-harm, factor, we have that type of substance abuse, which is part of that. But I also feel that, as far as the eating disorders is something that can be controlled. I hear that a lot of people, when you're dealing with these types of tendencies, BPD tendencies, the eating disorder is also co-occurring. But from what I've heard from most clients that are dealing with that, is that this is something that they actually control, meaning that they can control their own eating disorder, even though they're controlling when they eat or when they don't eat. And it gives them a feeling of control, but yet again, this is self-sabotage. This is self-harm in and of itself. It's self-harm. And so understanding that and analyzing that is super important to understand. So whether we're seeing that we have multiple symptoms of BPD, or we're seeing that a family member, a friend, a coworker, or a spouse, or a significant other is dealing with this, and this can be extremely helpful and understanding how to communicate, but also better understanding of why these things are happening. I think that when we don't have the answers and we don't understand and we're questioning why something's happening, we get lost in what we should do. Like, what is our response factor? How should I act? How should I respond? How should I respond in that situation? How should I act? What should I step back? Should I comment? And a lot of times when these things are happening, and let's say that someone's acting out because of their fear of abandonment. Maybe somebody's acting out and self-destructive because of the impulsivity. Maybe somebody is emotionally mood swinging, and that is creating havoc in our life, and it's triggering us to feel a certain way. In this situation now, we can understand better yet why this is happening. And if it's us ourselves that are doing it, understanding where this is coming from, because all of this can be worked with. All of this can be helped. And there's lots of ways of coping through things. There's ways of improving our interpersonal skills. There's ways of actually working on ourselves to begin to acknowledge this and actually deal with distress and control impulsivity. So there's ways of doing with this as well, and ways of working together. If this is a close friend, family member, spouse, there's ways of working together to make the situation work out even better, and also allow everybody to understand one another and begin to grow and not be triggered in the process. When I return, I'm going to be giving some more tips and tricks on things that you can do, some more awareness pieces, some more ahas, hopefully, to really help you to see things even more clearly. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. Well, I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about the signs and symptoms of borderline personality disorder and how to understand them better. And remember, when I was talking about those signs and symptoms, there's many of those signs and symptoms that any of us can have, anybody can have. That fear of abandonment is very readily available to anyone. The self-sabotage piece is very relevant to anybody. And so there's a lot of these pieces that we can all, have to some degree. Depends on, kind of at what degree are we dealing with that. But remember, we have to at least have 5 of the symptoms of BPD to even consider having those signs and symptoms. And we really need to think about that. And it's not about diagnosing. I think it's about understanding. And yes, we need to know and have information, but you might not be able to diagnose a relative, a family member, friend, or spouse, but understanding and seeing some of that and maybe bringing that to light so that they can begin to get some help that they need and begin to talk to somebody so they can actually discuss how they're feeling. And that can be very helpful in and of itself. So understanding those. And, really one of the things that I definitely want to really, express is that we can do many things to reduce any sort of negative vulnerability, which is avoiding drugs, things that are mood-altering drugs that we don't need to be taking. We can minimize stress. We can exercise regularly. We can work on meditation and relaxation techniques. We can get plenty of sleep. We can get a balanced and nutritious diet. There's a lot of things that we can do. We can also be aware of the things that we're doing that we need to stop doing, like the reckless sex, the dangerous driving, the binge drinking, the cutting, and seeing that because, of that impulsivity and dealing with distress. And that's where, when someone is feeling overwhelmed by difficult feelings, this is when we see this because we try to escape, right? We try to escape or control the situation with something else. And so we need to be moving from being out of control to trying to work to being in control in our day-to-day life and being able to manage our emotions and beginning with getting in touch with our emotions and staying calm and focusing even when we're in a situation that might be upsetting or overwhelming or emotional, and being able to really focus on concentrating on taking care of ourselves because we can feel out of touch, we can feel out of control, and those are the things that we don't want to feel. So we definitely want to gain control. And so ultimately, I'll be doing more shows on this and really expanding on these symptoms and signs and understanding. But if you're in a relationship with someone that has these signs and symptoms, if you're starting to see that you yourself have these signs and symptoms and you're starting to put together the pieces of the puzzle, it's time to begin to explore ways of dealing, ways of understanding, and ways of being able to open our mind and open our eyes to these emotions, calming ourselves down and understanding how to deal with basically the situations that take place. Because I believe that, these symptoms and signs, to me, are, kind of the way that we act out. It's the way that we're acting out based on the pathology. And so understanding, why do I act out this way? What is making me fearful? Is there something that this other person's doing that I need to be aware is triggering me? And remembering, too, that, somebody might be triggering us, but in the same half, we may also be triggering them. And so understanding that, some of our actions and some of our inactions could be triggering them as well, understanding that and seeing kind of both sides to the equation. I also think that being able to be in relationships where there is communication is extremely valuable because when we're in a relationship where there is not good quality communication, we are unable to communicate clearly our feelings as well as to understand someone else's feelings. And, one of the things, too, is just being able to ask questions of other people, not assuming things, because we don't want to just assume something or abruptly accept something because we're going to end up acting on those assumptions. So really getting clarified intentions with other people and also clarifying as much as we can our intentions, but also clarifying as much as we can with our emotions. If we feel a certain way, why am I feeling this way? If I'm wanting to go out and do this, or I'm wanting to go out and binge drink, why am I feeling this way? If I'm feeling overwhelmed about this feeling of abandonment, why am I feeling abandoned? Why am I feeling this feeling? Where is it coming from? Is it happening in the situation, or am I on am I really on edge emotionally feeling as if this is going to happen, but it's not necessarily going to happen. So there's lots of different things that we can look at and see, am I taking this to the extreme, and try to understand as best as we possibly can, but in the process being able to see ourselves more clearly, just to understand what we're dealing with, or help to understand what the other person's dealing with, and begin to see how we all play a role in the situation. I hope this show has helped you. I'll be talking about more on this subject. I have other videos and content on this subject as well. Check out the YouTube channel. Go to Ashley Burgess, Ashley Berges, or Life Coach Ashley Burgess on YouTube as well. Stay tuned. We have a show coming up for you next week. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.